running from the war, there was a sense of knowing at first, before I lost my entire family, that there was somewhere. So that gave me the strength to run from the war. And also just surviving each day. When you're alive, you know that there's a reason for it, so you continue going on. But when I was a child soldier, there was not a sense of anything beyond that word, So it wasn't that I thought, oh, I'm hoping to stay alive the next day. It was either I killed or I was killed, not only by the opposing fighting forces, but by your own squad as well. If you didn't carry out certain commands, you will be killed. So there was never a sense of thinking rationally about anything at all, and that wasn't allowed. Actually, there was no rationality allowed. If children who second guessed what was going on, or who sat on the side and cried for their mothers or for whatever family they'd lost, were immediately shot or killed. If you questioned command, you were killed. So because of these things, and the constant use of drugs and the violence and the trauma, you learn not to express your emotion, and as time goes on, you become hardened, that you don't feel anything anymore. No remorse, no compassion for anything. This becomes your reality, and you kind of embrace it fully just to stay alive, actually. Yeah. If children aren't rehabilitated effectively, it's because probably of the programming, and one of the things that Sierra Leone suffered from in the beginning was that we were one of the first test cases. So, and people didn't know how to really do this very well, because recruiting. I mean, the use of children in war is a kind of a really new kind of thing, and also healing them, something that the world hadn't had to deal with for a while. So, and that required actually making mistakes and then learning from those mistakes. In Sierra Leone, one of the biggest mistakes that was made was that people focus just on the child, on healing the child, the individual child. But in these countries where I'm from, community is very important. So when you heal the child with the community, it's more effective than when you just heal the child and then send them into the community to reintegrate by themselves. Reintegration becomes very difficult in that sense. Also, one of the things that we've been discussing through UNICEF is the fact that the programs are put in place very late during the war. Sometimes they're put in place, demobilization, disarmament and rehabilitation process is what they call DDR, put in place at the end of wars. And what that does is that there's a large number of people, of children, who needs to go through the process fairly quickly, and the time frame for the programs are not long enough. So you have them rushing kids through it, and then it doesn't work, because it took me 8 months to be able to regain myself and be put back into society. Now that doesn't mean that everyone should have 8 months. Some people require more, some people require less. So each child is different, and each culture, each community is different. So it requires a sensitivity and understanding of the places where you're trying to heal these people, so that you do it in the best interest of the child, and do it once and for all, because it's actually cost effective to do it that way too. Speaking about my experience, it's always difficult, but I think for me, I know the importance and the need for it, so that gives me the strength to continue talking about it. I think people have this idea that healing from this kind of stuff means forgetting. It's not. What I've come to do with my experience is that I've come to terms with them so well that speaking about them do not disturb me as much as they used to before, right after I got out of it. But the reason why it's important for me to continue doing this is because as I speak to you, the use of children continues all over the world. Currently not in Sierra Leone where I'm from, but it's not an African problem, it's a global issue. And so as long as the problem continues, I will continue to speak about it until something is done. When I was writing this book, one thing that I realized early on was that I needed to write about how I felt then as a child, not now. Because it would have been so easy having lived away from it and having gone to school to, being 12 years old and talking about, oh, the government is doing this. I wasn't thinking that when I was a kid, And I think what this shows is that you can engage people and get them upset about the politics without really criticizing the politics, just showing what it's doing to people. And that's how I want to write. Because if you chastise these leaders in these countries, it's dangerous in several levels. First of all, you have to work with them because they're the guys who are in there. So you want to make sure you don't chastise them to a point that it's difficult to work with them. So you have to be diplomatic in the sense that, one thing that I've learned through speaking is that when you actually have an idea and you make it seem like it comes from these guys, they're more likely to go along with it than if you chastise them, you might not be able to do anything with them. So if you want to help these children, you have to work with them. So you have to be very careful how you do it. One of the difficulties of writing this is remembering it. It's going to difficult places in order for me to accurately present what had happened, because I wanted to bring people on this journey with me, meant that I had to relive it. So that was a very difficult thing, and editing over and over, so reliving it over and over again. It was very exhausting, but physically, psychologically, but I think, for lack of a better word, it was therapeutic in the sense that I was able to really understand certain things and come to terms with it. And there was never a break, because when I wrote about the war, it was difficult. But when I wrote about before the war, it was also difficult because I realized how much I'd lost, how much I missed. So there was no in between. But what gave me the strength to be able to continue doing is that whenever I would stop from writing and decide that I didn't want to write, I will remember that as I was trying to run away from remembering that this was actually happening to a child somewhere right now. So that gave me the strength to sit down and try to write it. Because for me, remembering then became a very small price to pay to expose this. Because I know what it feels like to be in that world, to lose family, to lose faith in your own humanity, and to try to regain it, and the possibilities of all of this turning around. So that's where I gathered my strength to speak about it continuously, to write about it, and just, Publicity. I've gotten a lot of publicity, more than I imagined this book will get. When I was writing this book, I knew it would help raise awareness more so in the NGO community. I wasn't sure the reception would be so great, but it's been absolutely remarkable, and it's great. And I think it's helping raise awareness, but also I think it's really making people people see the possibility that these children whose lives are caught up in this can be helped. I think that's one thing that I really admire that the book is doing. Because sometimes when people hear about these children, it's very easy to think of them as a lost generation, that they're gone, you cannot do anything about them. But if there's anything, there's a loss of determination to really help these children. So, because I used to be one of these kids, and if people had given up on me, you would never have known that I could be capable of writing, or I would be able to have an intelligible conversation with anyone. Because what that life does to you is that in life of violence and in the war, it limits you from knowing yourself as a human being, from knowing what you're capable of doing. And that's the life for a lot of children. And so I'm really, that possibility that these children can be helped with the right care and support and commitment, they can be helped. It's very powerful for me that the book is doing that. What can people do to help in the Western world? Well, first of all, the beginning is to just expose yourself to the world, expose yourself, empower yourself with information, because if you know what this is and where it's going on, and what certain nations are not doing about it, then you're in a better position to talk to your senator, to talk to your government. One of the things that Human Rights Watch, that I'm on the committee that we're doing, is trying to lobby governments to stop giving military aid to countries that allow children to be recruited in their nations, whether it's through the government or through rebel groups. If governments make this a requirement that if you allow children to be recruited, we won't give you military aid, a lot of nations will actually solve the problem because they want the military aid, So these are some of the things, again, nations don't have to even send soldiers, they can just put this as a requirement, So, but it requires you to know what's going on, But, a long-term process is to really prevent these wars from happening, to gather international support and strengthen certain international standards to be able to do that. But the process of that is very slow. And oftentimes people are discouraged because, international laws develop very slowly. They don't develop as fast as people want them to be. And actually, to date, there's been a remarkable development in the area of removing children from war and making it an international crime. But because the process is so slow, sometimes it seems nothing is going on. But right now, there are people prosecuted at the International Criminal Court. Lubanga and Charles Taylor, one of the crimes he's prosecuted for is for recruiting children. So there's steps being done. But the short-term goal, not to forget about the long-term goal, that is something we can keep pushing on. The short-term goal is to remove these children from these wars and create enough rehabilitation centers. And people can do this by supporting organizations that do this kind of work, like UNICEF, several UN agencies. I myself am starting up a foundation that's going to embark on that kind of work as well, that we call the Ishmael Beah Foundation. For some people who cannot support these places financially, if you have the expertise, if you're a teacher, if you have time off, you go to these places and volunteer. They need all kinds of stuff, but it requires you finding out about it, exposing it to your friends, and this is something that we can do now while we wait for the international laws to actually kick in place and do something much more at a more stronger level, But we can remove those children and give them other options at life,